Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The betrayal of a loved one always catches us by surprise because that is why we consider people to be close when we fully trust them and do not expect a stab in the back. However, criminologists know that when it comes to a brutal murder, the perpetrator should be sought first of all among people from the victim's immediate environment. But what if it was not possible to complete the plan? The victim cannot yet testify because of his serious condition, and the perpetrator is frantically thinking about how to cover his tracks without arousing suspicion. It reminds the plot of some thriller, but alas, this story happened a few years ago in real life. The case of a pregnant Chinese woman named Wang Nan became one of the most high-profile incidents in Thailand. The perpetrator attempted to get rid of his wife in one of the national parks, framing the whole thing as a tragic accident. But it seems that nature itself intervened to save the young woman and her child from being killed. When the truth was revealed, it literally shocked the detectives who investigated the case, as well as the doctors who saved the victim's life, because they were all sure that the husband, with all his heart, is worried about his wife and baby. But even greater shock caused the motive for such a heinous and cruel act. It should be added that this case is not unique, and in the same Thailand, about the same period, there was a similar story with another couple from China. But the man unfortunately managed to bring the plan to an end. But let's talk about everything in order. Wang Nan was born in Nanjing, a major metropolis and former capital of China, in 1987. She grew up in a fairly well-to-do family, and her parents strove to give their daughter the best education and in every way to promote the development of her talents and potential. The girl studied well in school, and especially easy she was given to the exact sciences. After graduating from school, Wang Nan entered a prestigious university where she studied the basics of business and finance, and at the same time, on courses, mastered several foreign languages. After receiving a diploma, the girl got a job in a large travel agency where she was able to establish herself as a valuable, responsible, and very motivated employee. She quickly rose up the career ladder, and soon she was sent to Thailand so that she headed a new branch there and engaged in its development. Nan worked as a top manager for a few years, but then decided to leave the travel agency to start her own business. She opened a restaurant of Chinese national cuisine and managed it so successfully that soon her brainchild grew into a small but popular chain in Bangkok. Wang Nan was a successful young entrepreneur, competently led and developed the business. However, for the sake of career, she completely sacrificed her personal life. As the young woman later recalled, her last romantic relationship took place in her student days. But with the beginning of labor activity, she simply had no time to go on dates. Because of the total employment, Wang Nan was not too worried about her loneliness, even though she was already almost 30 years old. She was constantly in business, always rushing somewhere and working tirelessly. Even though she had lived in Thailand for a long time and had learned the language well, she decided to improve her skills and took additional courses to learn Thai at the training center. Wang happened to meet a young man named Yu who stared at her for a few minutes and then approached her in his native language. They exchanged a few words, and the guy asked her why Nan was studying the language, to which she replied that it was necessary for her business development. Yu then suggested that they exchange business cards so that they could meet and socialize sometime. Nan was not eager to continue chatting, but still, out of politeness, she handed him her business card, and he gave her his in return. The business card said that Xiaodong was in the export-import business in Bangkok. Wang wasn't impressed and simply tossed the business card into her purse, safely forgetting about it. Only Yu seemed to be seriously interested in the young woman and called her the very next day. However, she was busy with work and could not give the conversation even a couple of minutes and refused the offer to meet and have coffee. A few days later, the situation repeated itself, and Nan again refused to go on a date, citing her busyness and preparations for an upcoming business conference where she planned to expand her business ties and make new partners. Then Yu showed up at the event with a luxurious bouquet of flowers, and after waiting for Nan to get free, he approached her and asked her out again. Wang Nan was bribed by such persistence because no one had previously tried to get her attention so desperately, so she agreed to meet him and have dinner. It seemed that Yu didn't just fall in love with Nan, he literally lost his head. He constantly gave her signs of attention, made pleasant surprises and gifts, sent flowers to her doorstep every morning with little romantic notes inside, and called at least twice a day to say good morning and good night. Wang's feelings were twofold. On the one hand, she was annoyed by the guy's obsession, but on the other hand, she was flattered that someone was trying to win her love. So without expecting it, for the first time in a long time, the young woman plunged into a romantic relationship. Her boyfriend did not just woo her beautifully, but tried to be perfect in everything. He shared her interests and views in many matters, learned to cook Wang's favorite dishes, sought to diversify their leisure time by getting tickets to various events, and was also ready to help her at work and at home at the first request. Wang Nan could not believe her happiness. It seemed to her that this only happens in the movies, but it was really happening to her, except it was too much of a rush. They had only been dating for a few months, and he was already planning a wedding and coming up with names for their future children. Wang was a little embarrassed by this kind of talk, but at times like this, you started talking about how they were both in their 30s, and at that age, it was time to plan a family. A wedding without rings and veils. Nan didn't know how to behave or how to react to her suitor's behavior. She realized that he was right about his age, but she still doubted whether he was the right person to marry. One day, after another hard heart-to-heart talk, when Nan honestly confessed her doubts, you promised that he would prove his love to her. That same night after they went home, the man in love sent his girlfriend a long, touching letter full of tenderness. He confessed his love to her, promised to be the best husband in the world, and the best father to their children. In the morning, Wang found the suitor on the doorstep of her house with a bouquet of flowers. Xiao Dong declared that he had never been so serious in his intentions and was ready to take her as his wife right now. Nan, giggling, said that the courthouse wouldn't open until an hour and a half later, to which you offered to go there right now, and if the door was open, they would register the marriage immediately. Wang agreed to this venture, confident that the government office would be closed, but to her surprise, the door was opened, and the authorized officer registering unions was already at his desk. As it later turned out, you had arranged everything in advance, asking to make an exception for him and his bride and formalize their marriage early in the morning. It was a very strange wedding. No guests, no rings, no dress or veil, and no memorable photos. Wang Nan could not get rid of the thought that all this is not real, because she did not even introduce the chosen one to his mother, with whom they have always been very close. And when she came to her senses, in her hands was already a marriage certificate. Next to her stood a satisfied, smiling, newly married husband. A tragic accident in June 2019 when Wang was 3 months pregnant. Her husband persuaded her to arrange a vacation and go on a small trip, reasoning that after the birth of the baby, they would not be able to get out anywhere for a long time. Nan reluctantly agreed, and they chose the Thai National Park Reserve, famous for its picturesque forests and unique rock paintings, the age of which is estimated at tens of thousands of years. However, on the morning of June 9th, tragedy struck when the couple were on one of the observation decks where they were admiring the sunrise. Wang Nan suddenly fell down from a height of 10 feet. When rescuers arrived at the scene, a crying you ran up to them and begged for medics to save his wife and the baby she was carrying. The man said they were enjoying the first rays of the rising sun when suddenly his wife felt sick. She took a step to the side, but she became dizzy and slipped downward. Before he could pick her up, the young woman had fallen from the height of the 10th floor. She had several open fractures, and the situation seemed hopeless. But suddenly, Nan groaned and opened her eyes. Her husband immediately stopped crying and wailing, and a look of horror appeared on his face. However, he quickly pulled himself together, loudly thanked the Almighty that his beloved was alive, and then leaned to her ear and whispered something in Chinese. Unstable family life before dealing with the events of that tragic day. Let's go back 6 months and find out how the couple's family life was. To begin with, Wang regretted her marriage almost immediately as soon as it was registered. But at first, she was hoping that you would be a good husband, a reliable support, and a man to rely on. Alas, her hopes were not realized, and soon the new husband showed his true colors. He spent almost all his time at home playing computer games, willingly spent his wife's money, while he did not contribute anything to the family budget. When his wife asked him why he didn't go to work, Xiao Dong replied that his business was in a seasonal lull, and he could rest for the time being. However, this lull had become too long, so the young woman decided to inquire about her husband's work. That's when she found out that his successful export-import business existed only on paper and printed business cards. At that moment, Wang realized the full scale of the mistake she had made because she had not even thought about drawing up a prenuptial agreement. So now her husband can freely spend what she earns and in case of divorce, will claim her property. The couple had a serious conversation during which he cried like a child and assured that he had temporary difficulties, but he will definitely improve and find a good job. However, it soon became clear that he was not going to look for anything and felt quite comfortable sitting on his wife's neck. A grown man, and indeed behaved like a child almost all the time. He played computer games, and if he did something around the house or helped his wife in the restaurant, then he would be sure to ask her for money for his own needs. At some point, Wang got tired of it, and she said that she would no longer give him a penny until he found a job. Stealing from his own wife and an unwanted child, a day after that conversation, Yu disappeared, and with him, Nan's marriage certificate and identity card went missing. But she only noticed the missing documents in the evening when she received a call from her accountant inquiring about the transfer of a large sum of money from her account. The young woman was shocked because she had not transferred any money, but she immediately guessed who had done it. The amount involved was more than $500,000, which the husband had transferred to his personal account, providing the bank with his marriage certificate, his wife's documents, and assurances that it was their joint money which they managed together. Wang did not hesitate to go to the police to report the theft, and the fugitive husband was tracked down a few hours later when he tried to cash out some of the stolen funds at the station. Yu sobbed again and on his knees begged his wife's forgiveness. He admitted that he had lost a large sum of money gambling, and now he was threatened with death, demanding to repay the debt. In addition, it turned out that this was not the first time he had been on the radar of the police, and earlier, back in his native China, he had served 8 years for robbery. Nan almost burned with shame when she listened to all this because, as it turned out, she did not know the man she married. However, the young woman felt that gambling is a disease and she must help her husband to get rid of this addiction and return to normal life. Wang not only agreed to pay off half of her husband's debt, but also made him the manager of one of her restaurants. At first, Yu seemed to accept it gratefully and took the new position responsibly. He even developed a good strategy for the development of the establishment, but his enthusiasm was not enough for long. Soon, he began to spend more time playing computer games and entertaining again. During that period, Wang discovered that she was pregnant, which she informed her husband, but he reacted strangely and even aggressively. Yu said that he was not yet ready for this and persuaded his wife to have an abortion, which she categorically refused. Then the husband threatened divorce and said that he intends to seek through the court to divide the property. He did not speak to his wife for several days, but then suddenly softened and apologized. Yu admitted that he said nonsense on emotion, and in fact, happy about the upcoming addition, began to again show care, cook, and help around the house. Fateful trip 2 months van was absolutely happy because her marriage became almost perfect as promised by the lover at the beginning of their relationship. He was attentive, caring, responsibly fulfilled his job as manager, and actively prepared their home for the arrival of a child. One day, Xiao Dong offered his wife to ensure her life and health because she was pregnant, and such a step would help to protect her and the baby in case of various unforeseen situations. The young woman readily agreed and even wondered how she had not thought of it before. The insurance was taken out the very next day, and a couple of weeks later, Yu talked about taking a vacation to relax and unwind. Nan was hesitant, but her husband insisted, saying that they didn't have a honeymoon, and with a baby, they wouldn't be able to travel in the coming years. He also said that they had been through a difficult period and needed to reset to get rid of all the negativity and heavy thoughts. In the end, his arguments proved convincing and Nan agreed. Her husband chose the place himself, booked the hotel, mapped out the activities, and planned the itineraries so that the trip would be exciting and educational, but not too tiring for the pregnant woman. Nan entrusted the matter entirely to her husband and was happy to see how enthusiastically he was thinking about their vacation. On June 7th, the couple arrived at the park for the first time and spent most of the day there. They walked a lot and visited many beautiful sights and lookouts. On that summer Friday evening, the park had a huge number of visitors who were literally everywhere. Toward evening, Wang noticed that her husband was getting angry and very nervous. When she asked if everything was all right, he replied that because of the crowds of tourists, they couldn't have privacy and enjoy the sunset in silence. Wang Nan even relented, deciding that it would be very romantic. As the sun set, the park became less crowded, and Yu climbed the fence of the observation deck and started calling his wife to the edge, telling her what an incredible view there was. But the pregnant woman refused to go there, citing that it was already dark and it could be dangerous. The husband got angry but returned to her after a few minutes, saying that they would have to come to the park to meet the sunrise there. Since the couple returned to the hotel well past midnight, they decided to rest and sleep in on Saturday and head back to the reserve early Sunday morning. What happened on June 9th, early Sunday morning as planned, the couple went to the national park to admire the first rays of the rising sun. They woke up around 3 a.m. and left when it was still dark outside. There were hardly any visitors at that time, and Van thought for a moment that they were all alone there. The couple met the dawn on one of the observation decks, and afterwards, Yu went down to the cliff and began to persuade his wife to come up to him to admire the rock paintings. Nan hesitated, but her husband assured her that it was safe, and he would help her down and then climb up. The young woman trusted her spouse and cautiously approached it. The view from up there was indeed mesmerizing. Yu hugged his wife and suddenly asked her if she regretted anything in this life. Nan was surprised at such a question, but confidently replied that she didn't regret anything. Then Yu ran his hand through her hair, kissed his spouse on the cheek, and then leaned over to her ear and said, "Die." At that moment, he loosened his embrace and pushed his wife down the cliff. A miraculous rescue. Yu looked around once more to make sure no one had seen them. He then looked down intently, but didn't see where exactly his wife had fallen. He listened. It was quiet. No one screaming or calling for help, which meant there were no witnesses downstairs either. Yu then leisurely headed towards the park exit to bide his time and report the incident when Wang would surely be dead. However, down below, a few hikers who had turned off the trail noticed the body lying on the rocks and immediately called the rescuers, reporting the incident. Yudong had already left the reserve when several cars with flashers and sirens whizzed past him. He immediately realized what the matter was and went back, proceeding to the place where his wife had fallen. There he put on quite a show with tears, screams, and pleas for help. At that moment, he was sure that his wife was already dead, so no one would know the truth. But as it turned out, during the fall, Nan caught on the branches of trees, which reduced the speed and landed first on the bushes and then rolled on the rocks. All this cushioned the impact and saved the life of Wang and her child, but did not save her from serious injuries. While Yu was crying and lamenting that he did not want to live without his beloved wife and child, she suddenly opened her eyes and tried to say something but could not. At that moment, everyone noticed the genuine horror on her husband's face. But he quickly pulled himself together, leaned over to his wife, and hissed in her ear in Chinese that she should keep silent if she wanted to live, attempting to finish the job. The victim was diagnosed with head trauma, multiple closed and open fractures, lacerations, soft tissue contusions, ruptured internal organs, and massive blood loss. In addition, her spine was severely damaged, and doctors feared that even if she survived, she would never be able to walk again. Wang spent several days in a coma, hooked up to life support machines. During this time, her husband literally never left her side, spending days and nights in her room. Doctors applauded such devotion and love, but in fact, every time Yu was alone with his wife, he thought about how to finish her without arousing suspicion. He scrutinized the apparatuses, but he still couldn't figure out how to disable them discreetly. The terrible truth and the loss of a child. When Wang came to her senses, her husband was scared out of his wits. He did not leave her alone, not for a moment, fearing that at any moment she would talk and tell the police the truth about what had happened. Once alone, he threatened her again, saying that he had nothing left to lose. During the first interrogation, the victim confirmed her husband's words, saying that her fall was the result of dizziness. But a few hours later, when her husband left for a moment, Nan asked the nurse to call the police again and not to let her husband into the room. That's when she told the gruesome story of her fall, claiming that her husband had tried to kill her. Yu burst into the room, shouting that his wife was insane from the blow to her head, and that he would never harm her and the baby. But the man's words sounded extremely unconvincing, and he was taken into custody the same day. At the hospital, he was charged with several charges at once: attempted murder, as well as intimidation in case the victim spoke. When her husband was arrested and sent to jail to await trial, Wang breathed a sigh of relief. She still had a long period of rehabilitation ahead of her, but now she felt safe. At first, she had hoped that the pregnancy could be saved because the baby had survived the fall from the heights. However, because of the strong painkillers, several surgeries under general anesthesia, and the need to inject antibiotics, the doctors insisted on abortion because the priority was the life of the mother, and the fetus would still likely die from so many drugs. It was a huge shock for Nan, but she followed the doctor's recommendations. Trial and sentencing. Xiao Dong categorically denied his guilt and kept insisting on the accident version. In prison, he behaved calmly, hired good lawyers, and was confident that he would escape punishment or that it would not be too severe. Investigators and the prosecutor in charge of the case had no doubt that the defendant had committed the crime out of self-interest and hoped to receive a large insurance payout, as well as inherit his wife's fortune, which at the time amounted to almost 2.5 million. However, at one of the interrogations, Yu literally shocked everyone by talking about another motive for his inhumane act. It turns out that he resented his wife when she agreed to repay only half of his debt formed because of a passion for gambling. In the man's opinion, if his wife really loved him, she would have closed all his debts because she had the money. Xiao Dong then decided that Wang did not love him, and he had the right to punish her for it. After these words, the defendant fell silent and, realizing that he had said too much, said that he had been misunderstood. But his unexpected confession, as well as Nan's testimony, was enough to send him to prison for a long time. In March 2021, the defendant was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. But Xiong and his lawyers filed several appeals, and 6 months later, the Thai court showed wonders of leniency, reducing the life sentence to just 10 years in prison. Nan and her loved ones were shocked by the decision, saying that such a lenient sentence would set a bad precedent that could encourage others to commit similarly horrific acts. Also, in Thailand around the same time, a similar case occurred on Phuket Island where a Chinese national drowned his wife, claiming it was a swimming accident on the beach. He also did it for the sake of insurance. Since the fact of the murder was proved, the man was sentenced to death. Xiao Dong, on the other hand, was sentenced to only 10 years for the failed murder attempt and, in fact, the murder of the fetus. How did Wang Nan's fate turn out? To date, the final verdict in Wang Nan's case has not yet been issued. Yu is serving her 10-year sentence, and the injured woman is trying to challenge the court's decision. In parallel, Yu is also filing appeals in an attempt to prove her innocence and be released. For Xiao Dong stood up for his numerous relatives who claimed that he was a rich businessman and it was Wang married to him for selfish motives. However, there is no way to prove it as the man has nothing but huge debts. As for Nan, contrary to doctors' predictions, after a series of complicated surgeries and long rehabilitation, the young woman was able to get back on her feet. She relearned to walk, and most of the money she earned was spent on her recovery. In 2023, Nan took up work again and was able to revitalize her once successful business. She has also created and led an organization dedicated to helping women who are victims of domestic violence. She also runs her own blog, trying to warn women against the mistakes she made herself. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to the channel, and also don't forget to click the bell. There are many shocking stories ahead.